What happens when a wealthy tycoon mocks a veteran's humble boat and leaves it in ruins? The next morning, an entire harbor of Navy ships delivers a lesson he'll never forget. I've always said the sea don't care who you are. Rich, poor, young, old. She treats you the same. That's why I've spent my life on her, even after the jungles of Vietnam tried to break me. My name's Harlan Dempsey, and at 72, I don't ask for much. Just a quiet morning on my boat, tides on her, with the Chesapeake Bay stretching out like a promise. That boat's been my anchor since I came home from the war, patched up from shrapnel and carrying memories heavier than any storm. Today, though, I wasn't thinking about the past. I was thinking about the kids from the Solomon's Island Youth Center, waiting for me at Calvert Marina. I'd promised them a fishing trip, and if there's one thing I've learned in my years, it's that you don't break a promise to a kid. The sun was just climbing over the horizon, painting the water gold as I walked down Bayside Road toward the marina. Solomon's Island, Maryland, ain't exactly a bustling metropolis, just a quiet fishing town where folks know each other's names and the crabs are sweeter than anywhere else. My Navy cap, faded from years of sun and salt, sat low on my head, and my old canvas jacket hung loose on my frame. I ain't as spry as I was at 20, but my hands still know the ropes, and my heart still beats for the sea. At the marina, Tide's Honor bobbed gently in her slip at the far end of Pier C. She's a 30-foot fishing boat, built in '68, same year I got drafted. Her hull's scarred from years of hauling nets, and the paint's chipped, but she's sturdy, like me. I was checking the fuel line, making sure everything was set for the kids, when a low rumble cut through the morning quiet. I looked up, squinting against the glare. A monster of a yacht, 80 feet of polished chrome and arrogance, was slicing through the bay, kicking up a wake that rocked every boat in the harbor. Pinnacle Pride, the name read in gaudy gold letters. I muttered under my breath, some folks got more money than sense. The yacht docked at a prime slip, too close to Tide's Honor for my liking. Its engines roared, sending another wave that slammed my boat against the dock with a thud that made my chest ache. I steadied myself, gripping the piling, and watched as a man stepped onto the dock like he owned the whole damn bay. He was in his 40s, dressed in a blazer that probably cost more than my boat's repairs, with aviator sunglasses perched on his nose. Mason Caldwell, I'd later learn, was a Baltimore real estate hotshot who thought money could buy respect. His crew followed, young, loud, clutching champagne flutes like they were at a country club, not a working marina. I went back to my work, coiling a rope with the kind of focus that comes from years of discipline. I didn't have time for their nonsense. The kids would be here soon, and I wanted everything perfect. But then Mason's voice cut through the air, sharp and smug. "Hey, old man, you mind moving that piece of junk? It's ruining the view from my yacht." I stopped, my hand still on the rope. I've heard worse in my time. Enemy fire, screams in the jungle, doctors telling me I might not walk again. But something about his tone, that careless entitlement, hit me like a slap. I turned slow, meeting his eyes. "This boat's been here longer than you've been coming to this marina, son," I said, keeping my voice even. "She ain't blocking nothing." Mason smirked, glancing at his friends like I was some kind of sideshow. "Look, Pops, I'm just saying, that thing's an eyesore. Why don't you take it out to sea and let it sink? Do us all a favor." His crew laughed, and I felt that old familiar sting. Not anger, not yet, but a deep disappointment. I've seen men like him before, men who think the world's a game and they're the only ones with chips. I've buried friends who fought for their right to act like fools, and here he was, spitting on that sacrifice without a clue. "I'm taking some kids fishing today," I said, turning back to my boat. "This is all I need for that." Mason stepped closer, his polished shoes clicking on the dock. "Kids? On that death trap? You're gonna get someone killed, Grandpa. Stick to knitting or whatever old folks do." His friends howled, and I felt my jaw tighten. I ain't one for losing my temper. Lost enough of that in Nam, but I could feel the heat rising. Still, I kept my hands busy checking the rigging. "You don't own this dock," I said, my voice low, "and you don't own me." Mason's grin faltered just for a second before he leaned in, his breath reeking of expensive cologne. "You want to bet? I know the marina owner, one call, and your little fishing trip's canceled." Before I could answer, a young marina worker, Jamal Pierce, jogged over, his face apologetic. I've known Jamal since he was a kid, always respectful, always willing to lend a hand. "Mr. Dempsey," he said, glancing nervously at Mason, "I'm sorry, but Mr. Caldwell's got a point. We've had complaints about older boats taking up prime slips." I raised an eyebrow, my hand stilling. "Complaints? From who? I've paid my dues here for 20 years, Jamal. You know that." Jamal shifted, caught between duty and decency. "It's just, the new clients, they want the marina to look upscale. You know how it is." I looked past him to Mason, who was grinning like a cat with a canary. "Upscale," I repeated, my voice dry as driftwood. "That what you call this? Kicking a man out for doing what's right?" Jamal looked down, ashamed. "Maybe you could move Tide's Honor to the far end, just for today? It'd help me out." I glanced at the kids now gathering at the end of the pier, their faces bright with excitement. Diego Alvarez, a 12-year-old with more heart than most grown men, waved at me, his fishing rod slung over his shoulder. Those kids were counting on me, and I'd be damned if I let some city slicker ruin their day. "These kids need this, Jamal," I said. "I'm not moving my boat." Mason scoffed, pulling out his phone. "Fine, let's see how you feel when the tow crew shows up." He turned to his friends, raising his voice. "Can you believe this guy? Thinks he's some kind of hero because he's got a boat older than my dad." The kids heard him, and Diego stepped forward, his small frame trembling with anger. "Mr. Dempsey's a veteran," he said, his voice clear. "He fought in a war. You shouldn't talk to him like that." Mason laughed, loud and cruel. "A veteran? Oh, please. Every old guy in a cap says he's a war hero. What did you do, Pops? Polish boots in the mess hall?" I felt the weight of every scar on my body. Every night I woke up sweating from memories of gunfire and blood. But I kept my voice steady. "I served. That's all you need to know." The tension was broken by Brenda Whitaker, the marina manager, striding over with her usual no-nonsense air. She was a tough woman, ran the place like a ship, but I could see the strain in her eyes as she looked between me and Mason. "What's the problem here?" she asked. Mason jumped in, his voice dripping with confidence. "This guy's boat is a hazard, Brenda. It's taking up space, and my guests don't want to look at it. I'm paying premium rates for this slip. Do something." Brenda glanced at Tide's Honor, then at me. "Harlan, we're trying to modernize the marina. Maybe it's time to think about relocating your boat." I felt a cold knot in my gut, but I held her gaze. "I've got a contract, Brenda. Same as him. I ain't breaking it for his ego." Mason grinned, leaning toward Brenda. "Contract? Good luck enforcing that when I'm the one keeping this place afloat. Right, Brenda?" She hesitated, and I saw the conflict in her eyes. Loyalty to me against the pressure of money. Before she could answer, a deafening horn blared from the Pinnacle Pride. One of Mason's crew, impatient to head out, had gunned the engines, sending a massive wake rolling through the harbor. The wave hit Tide's Honor like a fist, slamming her against the dock with a crunch that echoed in my bones. Wood splintered and my boat listed hard, water pouring into the hull. I ran to the edge of the dock, my heart pounding like I was back in a firefight. "My boat!" I shouted, my voice raw. The kids gasped, crowding around while Mason's crew watched, unbothered. Diego grabbed my arm, his eyes wide. "Mr. Dempsey, is she gonna sink?" I knelt by the water, my hands shaking as I saw the damage. The hull was cracked, the bow caved in. That boat wasn't just wood and fiberglass. It was my life, my refuge, the place where I taught kids like Diego that the world could still be good. I stood, my face pale but my voice steady. "It's bad, Diego, but I'll figure it out." Mason, still on his phone, barely glanced up. "Told you it was junk. Maybe now you'll listen." I turned to him, my voice low, each word heavy. "You did this. Your yacht, Your crew. You think you can roll over people because you've got money?" He shrugged, his tone mocking. "Accidents happen, old man. File an insurance claim. Oh, wait. Does that thing even have insurance?" The kids murmured, angry, and Diego stepped forward again. "You can't just break his boat and laugh about it." Mason's friends snickered, and one of them, a woman named Tara Hensley, chimed in. "Kid, stick to fishing off the pier. Safer that way." I put a hand on Diego's shoulder, calming him. "Let it go, Diego. We'll handle this." Brenda, looking shaken, stepped in. "Harlan, I'm sorry. We'll get a tow crew to pull her to the yard. Maybe she can be fixed." "Fixed?" Mason snorted. "That thing's done. Scrap it and move on." I looked at him, my eyes burning with a fire I hadn't felt in years. "She's not scrap," I said. "Not to me." The kids were quiet now, their excitement replaced by worry. I forced a smile, though it felt like a lie. "Go on back to the youth center," I told them. "I'll sort this out and we'll fish another day." Diego shook his head, stubborn. "We're not leaving you, Mr. Dempsey. This ain't right." I looked at him, at all of them, and felt a warmth despite the pain. "I know, kid, but trust me. Go on now." They left, casting angry glances at Mason, who was already heading back to his yacht, laughing with his crew. Brenda promised a report, but her tone told me she was more worried about keeping Mason happy than fighting for me. As the Pinnacle Pride pulled away, its engines roaring, I stood alone on the dock, staring at the wreckage of Tide's Honor. That boat had carried me through loss, my wife, my youth, my faith in the world. Now it was broken, and the man responsible didn't give a damn. I ain't a man who cries easy, but standing there, I felt the weight of every year I've lived. Still, I straightened my cap and walked away, my steps steady. I'd faced worse than Mason Caldwell, and I'd face him again. The afternoon sun hung heavy over Solomon's Island, turning the air thick and sticky, like the inside of a crab trap left too long in the heat. I sat on a splintered bench outside the Calvert Marina office, my navy cap pulled low to shield my eyes from the glare. Tide's Honor, my boat, my refuge, was gone from the water now, hauled up to the repair yard like a wounded soldier. Her hull was cracked open, splintered wood jutting out like broken bones. I could still hear the crunch when that yacht, Pinnacle Pride, slammed her against the dock. It wasn't just a boat they broke. It was 30 years of mornings watching the sunrise, teaching kids like Diego Alvarez how to tie a knot, and finding peace when the world felt too heavy. I'm Harlan Dempsey, 72 years old, and I've carried heavier burdens than most. Vietnam left me with scars you can't see, and a limp that only bothers me when it rains. But losing Tide's Honor hurt in a way I hadn't felt since I buried my wife Ellen 10 years back. That boat was all I had left of her, of us. I sat there, my hands resting on my knees, steady as always, even if my heart was anything but. I kept thinking about the kids, their faces when they saw the wreckage. They deserved better than this. Inside the marina office, Brenda Whitaker was on the phone, her voice a low murmur through the glass door. I could make out bits and pieces, words like insurance and liability. I didn't need to hear the rest to know how it'd go. Men like Mason Caldwell, the real estate tycoon who'd turned my morning into a nightmare, always had the upper hand. Money talks louder than honor, and I learned that lesson long before I ever set foot on a battlefield. The marina was alive now, with tourists in bright polos and weekend sailors fussing over their boats. A few glanced my way, but to them I was just an old man in a faded jacket, sitting alone with nothing but a broken dream. I didn't mind their stares. I'd faced worse than curious eyes. Mortars, ambushes, and the kind of silence that follows a friend's last breath. But then I heard footsteps, quick and determined, and looked up to see Diego Alvarez, his sneakers kicking up gravel as he ran toward me. "Mr. Dempsey," he called, out of breath. his brown eyes blazing with that stubborn fire I'd come to admire. "I told the other kids what happened. They're mad as hell. We want to do something." I managed a small smile, though it felt like lifting an anchor. "Appreciate that, Diego, but this ain't your fight. You've got school, your mom to look after. Let me handle it." He crossed his arms, his 12-year-old frame radiating defiance. "You always tell us to stand up for what's right. That guy wrecked your boat and laughed about it. We can't just let him get away with it." I looked at him, at the way his jaw set like he was ready to take on the world. Kids like Diego, they're why I kept coming back to the youth center, why I kept Tide's honor afloat all these years. "You're a good kid," I said, my voice softer than I meant it to be. "But sometimes, standing up means knowing when to wait. You gotta pick your battles." He didn't like that, I could tell. But before he could argue, the office door swung open. Brenda stepped out, her face tight with worry. She's a good woman, Brenda, runs the marina like a general. But I could see the strain in her eyes, like she was caught in a riptide. "Harlan," she said, her voice low, "I've got bad news. The insurance company says Tide's honor isn't covered for this kind of damage. They're calling it an act of negligence by a third party. Unless Mason Caldwell's insurance steps up, you're on your own." I felt a cold knot twist in my gut, but I kept my face steady. "And what's Caldwell saying?" Brenda sighed, glancing at the dock where the Pinnacle Pride gleamed like a trophy. "His lawyer called, claims it was an accident, and they're not liable. They're offering $1,000 as a goodwill gesture." Diego's eyes went wide, and he let out a sound halfway between a scoff and a shout. $1,000? That won't fix nothing. That boat's worth way more than that." I put a hand on his shoulder, silencing him. "It ain't about the money, Diego," I said, though the words tasted bitter. "It's about what's right." I turned to Brenda. "What's the marina's stance?" She looked away, her fingers twisting the pen in her hand. "We're neutral, Harlan. You know how it is. Mason's a big client. He's got a lot of pull around here." I nodded, slow, letting her words settle like silt. Neutral. That's what they call it when they're too scared to stand up to money. I stood, my bad knee protesting, and tipped my cap to her. "Thanks for letting me know, Brenda." As I walked toward the repair yard, Diego trailed behind, still fuming. "This ain't fair, Mr. Dempsey," he said, his voice cracking. "They're treating you like you don't matter." I stopped, turning to face him. "Life ain't fair, Diego, never was, but it's what you do with the unfairness that counts. You keep your head up, you keep going." I tried to believe it myself, but standing there, with the weight of the day pressing down, it felt like empty words. The repair yard was a graveyard of boats, all rust and chipped paint, but Tide's honor stood out, even broken. Leroy Tatum, the yard manager, was poking at the damage, his face grim. He's a big man, built like a linebacker with hands that could crush a crab shell. "Harlan," he said, shaking his head, "this is bad. Hull's shot, engines flooded. You're looking at 10 grand to fix her, maybe more." I ran my hand along the splintered wood, feeling every scar like it was my own. "She's been through worse," I said, my voice quieter than I meant. "I'll find a way." Leroy gave me a look, part pity, part respect. "I don't know, man. Might be better to scrap her. I can get you a deal on a used skiff." I fixed him with a stare, the kind I used to give green recruits who thought they knew better. "She's not scrap, Leroy. Not yet." As I left the yard, laughter hit me like a wave. Across the marina, Mason Caldwell was holding court on the Pinnacle Pride, music blaring, champagne flowing. His guests, all polished and loud, crowded the deck, their voices carrying over the water. I heard Mason's voice, sharp and smug. "That old guy thought he could stand up to me," he said, grinning. "Should have seen his face when his boat went crunch." The crowd laughed, and I felt my chest tighten, like a line pulled too taut. I've faced men like him before. Officers who sent boys to die for no reason. Bureaucrats who forgot us when we came home. But hearing him mock me, mock Tide's honor, it was like a knife twisting in an old wound. I turned to leave, but a new voice stopped me. "Mr. Dempsey?" It was a woman, maybe mid-30s, with a navy blazer and a clipboard. "Naomi Rivera," she said, a reporter for the Calvert County Times. "Diego Alvarez called me," she said, her eyes sharp but kind. "I heard what happened this morning. Can I ask you a few questions?" I hesitated. I ain't one for attention. Never was. But something in her voice, that quiet determination, made me nod. "Go ahead." She asked about Tide's honor, about my time in Vietnam, about the incident with Mason's yacht. I kept my answers short, sticking to the facts. I didn't tell her about the bronze star I keep in a drawer or the nights I still wake up hearing choppers. But Diego, who'd come back with a few other kids from the youth center, couldn't hold back. "That guy's a jerk," he said, pointing at the Pinnacle Pride. "He laughed about wrecking Mr. Dempsey's boat." Naomi scribbled notes, her pen moving fast. "Mr. Dempsey, mind if I take photos of the damage? This could be a story people need to hear." I shrugged, my hands in my pockets. "Do what you think is right." As she snapped photos, Mason noticed and stormed over, his face dark as a squall line. "What's this? You trying to make me look bad, old man? You and your little fan club?" I met his gaze, my voice steady as stone. "I didn't call her. She came on her own." He turned to Naomi, his voice sharp. "You print anything about me, and I'll have my lawyers bury your paper. This is a private matter." Naomi didn't flinch, her pen still moving. "Public doc, public incident. Sounds like news to me." Mason's jaw clenched, and he stepped closer to me, his voice low and venomous. "You're making a mistake, Pops. You think you can embarrass me? I own half this town. You're nobody." The kids gasped, and Diego started to speak, but I raised a hand. "Let him talk, Diego. Words don't change facts." I said it calm, but inside, I was burning. I've been called worse than nobody. Coward, traitor, when I came home from Nam to protests and spit. But this was different. This was a man who thought he could erase me because I didn't fit his shiny world. Mason smirked, turning to his friends. "See? He knows his place." He leaned in, his voice a whisper meant only for me. "Keep pushing, and I'll make sure you never set foot in this marina again." I didn't answer. Sometimes silence says more than words. He laughed, rejoining his party, while Naomi finished her photos. "I'll run this in tomorrow's paper," she said. "People deserve to know what happened." I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. As I walked away from the marina, the sound of Mason's music faded, replaced by memories I'd buried deep. Jungle heat, the weight of a rifle, the faces of men who never came home. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing. I'd faced worse than Mason Caldwell, and I wasn't backing down. I woke up to the smell of coffee and the weight of yesterday still sitting on my chest. My name's Harlan Dempsey, 72 years old, and I've learned that some mornings you don't wake up ready to fight. You wake up just hoping to stand. The Calvert County Times was spread out on my kitchen table in my small apartment on Bayside Road, Solomon's Island, Maryland. The headline screamed, "Veteran's Boat Destroyed by Tycoon's Yacht, Community Rallies." Naomi Rivera, that sharp reporter, had laid it all bare. The wreck of Tide's honor, the kids' anger, even a line about my bronze star from Vietnam, though I hadn't told her about that. She'd dug it up herself, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it. I've never been one for medals or applause. They don't bring back the men I couldn't save, or the years I spent piecing myself back together after the war. I sipped my coffee, black and bitter, staring out the window at the gray sky over Chesapeake Bay. The harbor was usually quiet this early, just the gulls and the soft slap of waves. But today there was a hum in the air, like the town was holding its breath. I was still turning over yesterday. Mason Caldwell's smug grin, the splintered hull of my boat, the kids' faces when they realized our fishing trip was off. I'd promised them we'd sail again, and I meant it. But with the insurance company dodging and the marina playing neutral, I wasn't sure how. All I knew was I'd faced worse than a rich man's ego. I'd carried wounded men through jungle mud under fire. I could handle this. A sharp knock at the door snapped me out of my thoughts. It was Diego Alvarez, his eyes wide, his breath coming fast, like he'd run all the way from the youth center. "Mr. Dempsey, you gotta come to the marina. Something big's happening." I set my mug down, frowning. "What's going on, Diego?" "Just come," he said, tugging at my sleeve. My bad knee groaned as I grabbed my jacket and navy cap, but I followed him, his urgency pulling me along like a current. The walk to Calvert Marina was short, but when we got there, I stopped dead. The harbor was a sight I hadn't seen since my Navy days. Gray-hulled Coast Guard cutters lined the docks, their crews moving with crisp efficiency. A Navy patrol boat bobbed nearby, and beyond the breakwater, a destroyer loomed, its silhouette cutting through the morning mist like a promise of reckoning. Uniformed sailors and officers were everywhere, their boots heavy on the wooden docks, their voices sharp with purpose. I blinked, trying to make sense of it. The Pinnacle Pride, Mason Caldwell's gaudy yacht, was still docked, but its party vibe was gone, replaced by a tense quiet. Mason stood on the dock, his tailored blazer looking out of place among the uniforms. He was arguing with a tall man in a Navy commander's uniform, his face red, his gestures wild. His entourage hovered behind him, but they weren't laughing now. Diego pointed, his voice a mix of awe and excitement. "That's Commander Travis Henshaw from Patuxent River Naval Air Station. I heard he knows you." My heart skipped. Travis Henshaw. I hadn't seen him in decades, not since we were young corpsmen in Da Nang, dodging bullets and binding wounds. How the hell did he get here? Before I could ask, Travis spotted me and strode over, his face breaking into a grin that carried the weight of old battles. "Harlan Dempsey, you old sea dog," he said, clapping my shoulder. "Still stirring up trouble?" I shook his hand, my grip firm despite the years. "Travis, what's all this about?" His grin faded, replaced by a fire I remembered from the jungle. "Read the paper this morning. So did half the base. When we heard what happened to Tide's honor, I made a few calls. Nobody treats a man like you this way. Not on my watch." I felt a lump in my throat, but I kept my voice steady. "You didn't have to do this, Travis." He fixed me with a look, the kind that says more than words. "You saved my life in '71, Harlan. Carried me 2 miles through hell with a bullet in my leg. You think I'd let some rich punk walk all over you?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Memories of those days, mud, blood, the screams of the wounded, came rushing back, but I pushed them down. This wasn't Vietnam. This was Solomon's Island, and I just wanted my boat fixed. But before I could say anything, Brenda Whitaker, the marina manager, hurried over, her face pale. "Harlan," she said, her voice shaking, "I'm so sorry about yesterday. I didn't know. I didn't realize who you were." I raised an eyebrow, my tone dry. "I'm the same man I was yesterday, Brenda. Just a guy trying to keep a promise to some kids." She flushed, her hands twisting together. "I should have stood up for you. I was wrong." I nodded, letting her words hang. The crowd was growing now, locals, kids from the youth center, even a few reporters, including Naomi Rivera with her camera. Across the dock, Mason was shouting at a Coast Guard officer, a woman with a lieutenant's bars and a no-nonsense stare. "This is harassment," he yelled, his voice cracking. "You can't swarm my yacht over some sob story in the paper." The officer, Lieutenant Carla Espinoza, didn't blink. "Mr. Caldwell, we're investigating a maritime incident. Your vessel caused significant damage to private property. We have witnesses, photos, and a report that suggests negligence." Mason's face turned crimson. "Negligence? It was an accident. That old man's boat was a hazard." Carla's eyes narrowed, sharp as a blade. "That old man is a decorated veteran who served this country while you were still in diapers. Show some respect." The crowd murmured, and I felt a flush of discomfort. I didn't want this. A circus, a showdown. I just wanted Tide's honor back on the water, the kids' laughter filling the air. Diego, bouncing beside me, was grinning ear to ear. They're sticking up for you, Mr. Dempsey. I managed a half smile. Looks that way, kid. Naomi Rivera approached, her camera flashing. Mr. Dempsey, any comment for the follow-up story? I shook my head, my voice quiet but firm. Let the truth do the talking. But the truth was loud enough. A group of sailors from the destroyer had gathered near Tide's Honor in the repair yard, their hands running over the splintered hull like it was a wounded comrade. A young petty officer, Malik Jordan, called out, "Mr. Dempsey, we're volunteering to fix your boat. No charge. It's an honor, sir." My throat tightened, and I nodded, unable to find words. Diego tugged at my sleeve, his eyes shining. "See? I told you people would care." Mason, meanwhile, was coming apart. His lawyer, a slick man named Preston Lyle, had shown up. But even he looked nervous as Travis handed him a document. "This is a formal complaint filed with the Coast Guard," Travis said, his voice calm but cutting. "Your client's yacht is impounded until the investigation's done, and I've got a feeling the marina's insurance company will want a word." Mason's bravado cracked like thin ice. "You can't do this," he shouted, his voice echoing across the water. "I'll sue you all." Travis smiled, cold and steady. "Go ahead, I've got the Navy JAG Corps on speed dial." The crowd erupted in cheers, and I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Brenda, her eyes wet with regret. "Harlan, the marina's covering the repairs, no matter what the insurance says. And your slip's yours for life." I nodded, my voice low. "Appreciate it, Brenda. Truly." As the sailors organized a repair crew and the Coast Guard boarded the Pinnacle Pride, Mason stood alone, his entourage melting away like fog. The locals, who'd barely noticed me yesterday, now looked at me with something like respect. Diego and the other kids ran to me, their faces bright with pride. "You're a hero, Mr. Dempsey," Diego said, his voice ringing. I knelt to their level, my bad knee creaking but my heart full. "I ain't a hero, Diego. I'm just a man who keeps his word, and I promise you we'll be fishing again soon." The crowd parted as Travis saluted me, crisp and formal, the kind of salute that carries the weight of shared battles. I returned it, my eyes steady, though inside I was shaking. I didn't need the cheers or the headlines. I had my dignity, my boat, and the kids who believed in me. That was more than enough. Mason slunk back to his yacht, his lawyer trailing like a scolded dog. The harbor, filled with Navy ships, stood as a testament to something Mason would never understand: loyalty, honor, the kind of strength that doesn't come from money. I turned to the water, the weight of the day lifting like a tide going out. Tide's Honor would sail again, and so would I.